My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 34 years old, and for a long time, I believed I was living someone else's life. From the outside, everything looked perfect. My husband Daniel and I lived in a quiet suburb outside Chicago. We had a beautiful home, two amazing children, and stable careers. People often told us how lucky we were. They only saw the picture. They never saw what was happening behind the frame. 8 years earlier, Daniel had been my best friend. We laughed together. We talked about everything. We dreamed about the future. Somewhere along the way, those conversations disappeared. Life became schedules, bills, responsibilities, and silence. The silence was the worst part. We weren't fighting. We weren't screaming. We simply stopped connecting. Every morning felt the same. Wake up. Get the kids ready. Go to work. Come home. Eat dinner. Sleep. Repeat. Months turned into years. I felt invisible. One rainy Thursday evening, after a difficult day at work, I stopped at a small coffee shop downtown. I ordered a latte and sat near the window. That's when I noticed him. His name was Ryan. He was sitting alone with a laptop and a stack of books. A few minutes later, he glanced over and smiled politely. Normally, I would have looked away. That night, I smiled back. It seemed harmless. A simple conversation started. Then another. Then another. Ryan was easy to talk to. He listened. Not the kind of listening where someone waits for their turn to speak. Real listening? The kind that makes you feel important. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Weeks passed. Our conversations became longer. Our messages became more frequent. Every notification from him made my heart race. Deep down, I knew I was crossing lines. But I kept telling myself the same lie. It's just talking. The truth was much more complicated. Ryan became the person I looked forward to hearing from every day. He knew my fears, my dreams, my regrets, parts of me that my husband hadn't asked about in years. One evening, Ryan looked at me across a restaurant table and asked a question that changed everything. "Rachel, are you happy?" I opened my mouth to answer. Nothing came out, because I already knew the truth. I wasn't happy. I hadn't been happy for a very long time. The following months became emotionally exhausting. I felt trapped between two worlds. One world was familiar but empty. The other felt exciting but uncertain. I barely slept. I constantly worried someone would discover the truth. Most importantly, I started asking myself difficult questions. Why had my marriage reached this point? What had happened to us? Was I running towards something better? Or simply running away from my problems? One night, after the children were asleep, I found Daniel sitting alone in the living room. The television was on, but he wasn't watching it. He looked tired, older, lonelier than I had ever noticed. For a moment, I realized something shocking. I wasn't the only person suffering. He was hurting too. We had spent years blaming each other silently. Years waiting for the other person to fix everything. Years building walls. That night, for the first time in a long time, we talked honestly. Not about bills. Not about work. Not about schedules. About us. The conversation lasted until nearly 3 a.m. Some parts were painful. Some parts were heartbreaking. There were tears. There were long silences. There were truths neither of us wanted to hear. But there was honesty. Real honesty. The next morning I met Ryan. I thanked him for the kindness he had shown me. I thanked him for helping me realize how unhappy I had become. Then I told him goodbye. Not because he was a bad person. Not because our friendship wasn't meaningful. But because I finally understood something important. No outside relationship could solve problems that I refused to face myself. Walking away hurt. For weeks it hurt. But it was the right decision. Daniel and I didn't magically fix our marriage overnight. Real life doesn't work that way. We started counseling. We learned how to communicate again. Some days were good. Some days were difficult. Trust had to be rebuilt. Connection had to be rebuilt. Everything had to be rebuilt. Slowly, patiently, one brick at a time. 2 years later, I sat in the same coffee shop where this story began. Rain tapped softly against the window. Across from me sat Daniel. He smiled. I smiled back. For the first time in years, the smile felt genuine. Life wasn't perfect. No life ever is. But it was real. And sometimes real is better than perfect. Looking back, I learned a lesson I will never forget. Loneliness can make us search for answers in dangerous places. Attention can feel like love. Escape can feel like freedom. but the hardest conversations are often the ones that save us. Sometimes the biggest change doesn't come from finding someone new. Sometimes it comes from finally facing the truth about yourself.